welcome back to Bar One Betting's League of Ireland Lowdown. You're with myself, Kieran Burke, and former League of Ireland manager Shane Keegan. A reminder to follow the Bar One Betting podcast on Spotify for weekly episodes of League of Ireland Lowdown and all of our other podcast content as well. Shane, good to have you. Before we get stuck into the League of Ireland, I know you're a bit of a Premier League follower. You're a Spurs fan. God love you. Bad start for them. What did you make of the opening weekend?
Yeah, listen, it's all this new hope and went up in smoke very, very quickly from the Spurs perspective anyway, that's for sure. But I mean, listen, as a Spurs fan, obviously it was a killer, but Jesus, what more can you say about Brentford? I mean, it's just incredible. You know, I mistakenly, well, listen, it's only one game in, but I suppose I would have felt that there was a chance at Brentford this year that they could have a challenge from the old kind of second season syndrome kind of a thing that I just thought Keith did so well last year. He was unbelievable what he did there, that I just thought they were going to find the goal maybe a lot tougher this year. But listen, what do I know? What a start. They absolutely obliterated Tottenham. But look, at least Tottenham weren't the only so-called bigger club that dramatically underachieved. Yeah, it was a bit of a shock weekend for a few of the bigger sides. United obviously being the obvious one, and Liverpool getting away with it a little bit as well.
Yeah, mauled by the Tigers, of course, Manchester United, but maybe a bit of the Duff factor at Brentford.
Yeah, well, look, again, I suppose, if I did have concerns for Brentford, you were looking and going, they've been that successful, and then Damien goes in, and then what if they're down around the bottom? Are people kind of looking at him being the new face around the place, and does his face fit and all that fit and that? But on the flip side, if they are able to repeat last season or even go one better, well, then that can only do his reputation the power of good.
Yeah, I was reading some comments from Nathan Collins after the weekend, and he was speaking about Damien Duff, the impact he's had. The players seem to love him already, and Keith Andrews has came out and he's clarified that he very much is his assistant, his number two. There was a bit of confusion what Damien's role actually is, but he's the number two, so be interesting to see what sort of an impact he can have. But God, he's an almighty loss to the league, isn't he?
Asher, he is, no doubt, absolutely no doubt. I mean, I don't think. I just can't think of any other personality who was so front and center for her on a weekly basis. And it wasn't even like, do you know what I mean? I never got the feeling of a Damien that he was actually attention seeking. I think he just had no filter. And I think just whatever came into his head came out through his mouth straight away. And when you've got a character as divisive and as fascinating as Damien is, that's exactly what you want. You just want him to not to think and just talk. And yeah, he's been missed around the place, that's for sure.
Yeah, as the kids say these days, he just has an aura about him. I mean, I've interviewed probably every manager in the league at this stage over the last 10 years, and he was the only one probably when I was stood in front of him, I did freeze up a little bit. He was looking you up and down, just waiting for you to slip, say something wrong, and he'd pounce. So he was intimidating. But yeah, from a media point of view, he's been a big loss to the league. But look, speaking of the League of Ireland, it's another big couple of days coming up for Shamrock Rovers. Not an ideal first leg result. They drew 1-1 in their Conference League playoff, and they've got the second leg coming up on Thursday. We all know the troubles they've had on the road this season. Do you fancy them to get over the line?
Jeez, it's hard to know, Kieran, isn't it? Like when the draw came out, I was looking, going, "Oh, that does look a tough enough one." And yeah, exactly as you've said, the away form has just been so poor that you're looking at it and you're going, right, they're going to need to win this first leg, and they're arguably going to need to win this first leg by two. I think their aggregate score in the three away games in the three previous rounds is 10-1, which is very, very hard to get any great confidence from that they can go and turn that around. So look, I really think they're going to be up against it. Look, hopefully they've found the medicine or found some sort of solution to the away day blues when they've travelled. Obviously, there was publicized story around travel arrangements not going according to plan the last time, although I think it was more club staff than the players themselves that affected. But still, anything that kind of throws off your preparations at all isn't ideal. So no doubt they'll have absolutely everything nailed for this. And fingers crossed they can go, because it would be so disappointing not to have Irish interest in Europe for a prolonged period. we've been spoiled. We've just got used to it, Kieran, over the last few years, which is a brilliant thing to be able to say. But we'd really miss it if it wasn't there heading into the winter months, I think.
Yeah, it really does liven up the winter. Even just before, a couple of days before Christmas last year, I popped over to Tala, got to watch Crystal Palace against Shelbourne. Great to have occasions like that on your doorstep. So really hope Rovers can get there. But we spoke about it last week before the first leg. They were the slight favourites to qualify through this tie. They're now the clear outsiders. They're 31-20 to qualify. KuPS are 4-9. The match betting for Thursday, Rovers 3-1 outsiders. The home side are 9-10. Draw is 12-5, but fingers crossed Rovers can find a way to get into that league phase. I suppose while Rovers have been away on European duties, the League of Ireland has continued. St. Pat's have cut the lead at the top to 4 points after a convincing win away to Drogheda.
Yeah. Look, we spoke about this, didn't we, last week, that if there was going to be any semblance of a league title race, that these were the kind of games that Pats just couldn't afford not to be taking maximum points from. And they've let us down so many times, I suppose, before in these kind of games that you were concerned going into it. But no, thankfully, no hiccups from them. And now, look, on paper, 4 points. Yes, Rovers still have a game in hand, but it's starting to look like we could possibly have something to get excited about going into the later stages. Again, it's a huge one for them this week because, exactly same, repeat everything we said from last week, in the sense that, look, they obviously are playing against a dramatically improving side, but it's still a team down around the bottom. And if you have any intentions of making a proper tilt at a league title, you've just got to be winning those games. So look, again, it's not, this is not an anti-Shamrock Rovers stance by any stretch. It's just, as a neutral, I would love to have something to keep us glued to the title right till the very end. And it's for those reasons that you would love to see Pats, show a bit of momentum now and just put the squeeze on Rovers. If Rovers won it with a round or two left because they've gone on a run where they've won 5 and 6 in a row, Kieran, I think, they're capable of doing that. And I think to a certain extent we could accept that. And I think Pats and Bows fans could probably accept that as well. What the frustration at the moment is that, that Rovers have been kind of cruising to a title where they've been stuttering and stumbling themselves, and that must be incredibly frustrating. So listen, hopefully a sign of a bit more consistency to come from Pats in these final weeks.
From a Drogheda perspective, they were battered here. I know Pats only got the second goal late on, but Pats had 19 shots in the game, 7 on target. Drogheda only had 1 shot on target at home in the entire game, and they are without a win now in the league since they beat Dundalk in the Louth Derby on the 10th of July. Those two teams meet in Drogheda this coming Friday. I was at Oriel Park on Friday. It was a big night for Dundalk there. They were celebrating their centenary in the League of Ireland, and unfortunately they couldn't live up to the occasion. They were beaten 2-1 by Galway, and I'd have to say probably one of the poorest performances I've seen from Dundalk during Kieran Kilduff's time at the club. So you'd be worried for neither of the Louth clubs look like they can buy a win at the moment. So I know we'll be talking about that game later, but that game on Friday looks hugely important for both right now.
It does, Kieran, and listen, because of the reasons you've outlined there, might seem a strange thing to say about a team that are still top half of the table as Dundalk are, but I don't know, if I'm Kev right now and you look at the predicament that Drogheda are in and the desperate need for 3 points, I think this is the game they want. I really do. I think this is the game they want. At home, local derby against, yes, they're not in fantastic form themselves, but against a team that are really struggling for any positive results or any sign of momentum. And I don't know. I just have a bit of a belief that this could be a massive result, a massive game for Drogheda, and they do have the potential to go and take all 3 points. They've done quite well against them. They haven't lost to them this season, Kieran, and this is their 4th game against them. 2 draws and Drogheda have won the other one. So I'd give them a serious chance here. As we say, points have been very hard to come by for them, but equally so for Dundalk. As you say, you saw that last performance. I think it was Saint, I was speaking to Killer myself a couple of weeks ago on our pro license CPD, and he was kind of nearly half joking about himself and Ronan Murray nearly having to pull back on the boots. Such was the paucity of options after the few players that they'd lost and the couple of injuries they'd picked up and stuff like that. it's hard to see it getting much easier for them. I tipped them last week to go and win that game at home to Galway. I thought that was one that might present a real chance for them, but having lost that game as well, I'm really finding it hard to have any great faith in them at the moment.
Game of the weekend was undoubtedly at Dalymount Park. Bohemians 5-3 winners against Derry City, and they came from behind to win this game, and some incredible goals were scored as well.
Yeah, listen, I couldn't kind of believe it. I wouldn't really have given Derry much of a hope in this one, and yet they found themselves 1-0 up at half time. But essentially, listen, whatever Rennie said at half time, Kieran, Rennie's a polarizing character, probably within his own fan base, never mind across the league. But he's got a massive amount of experience. I would have shared dressing rooms with Rennie in roles at Dundalk, and he's a serious motivator. He's a really good talker. He speaks from the heart, and I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that halftime team talk the other day. I can only imagine that it was one of his better ones, because to find his side 1-0 down at halftime, and in less than 10 minutes after the restart, they're 7 minutes, I think, they're 3-1 up. I mean, talk about your team talk having the desired effect. So he'll have been absolutely delighted with that. It did start to look a little bit shaky a little bit later in the game when Derry got one back, but and I think that goal actually even came after the red card, didn't it? I think Clark had been sent off by that stage. And he would have been annoyed to see, 3-1 up and the opposition down to 10, and all of a sudden it's back to 3-2 again. But no, they kicked on very well. Ross Tierney massively came to life at that stage, didn't he? Two absolutely outstanding goals in different ways. I'd argue I nearly preferred the first of his two, even though the second one, being the distance it's out from, is nearly more eye-catching. I just thought the cleverness of the first one was top drawer, and yeah, reasonably comfortable win for them in the end, and more the same in terms of Derry.
And Sligo and Waterford played out a scoreless draw. It's not a great result for Sligo. I know they've cut the gap to draw it to 5 points. Waterford will be happy enough to keep a good run of form going, but for Sligo, they need to start picking up wins soon.
Yeah, no, look, and to be honest with you, what amazed me, I watched the full of that game, Kieran, because it was on TV, and what amazed me was, the final 15 minutes. If you were to watch that game and not know the backstory of the two teams, you would have said in the final 15 minutes, well, Waterford must be the team that are rock bottom and desperate for the points here, because they look to be the ones that were trying to force the issue far more. Sligo just didn't really seem to have enough about them to be able to. Now, sorry, I should say in the middle of the game, Sligo had a very strong period where they probably should have got themselves ahead, but they just kind of ran out of steam as the game went on, and the closer it got to the end, the more you thought Waterford might manage to sneak something, but. Yeah, look, Sligo, they're just running out of time, aren't they? I mean, ordinarily, a 0-0 draw at home to a team that are in such good form as Waterford wouldn't be a bad result on paper, but given their current circumstances, it was a bad result, really, wasn't it?
Just before we start looking ahead to this weekend's matches, I'd love to get your thoughts. The new third tier is going to be starting this weekend. Do you think that's going to be a positive for Irish football?
Yeah, really, really hoping it will, Kieran. I suppose I have a sentimental attachment to the third tier, in that I started out myself back when they had the old League of Ireland A Championship. Sure, it's what, the guts of 20 years ago at this stage. And people always comment, rightly so, on the fact that it's an extra avenue for players to try and compete at a national level and learn and grow, and maybe use as a stepping stone to get up to higher levels. But the very same applies for managers, Kieran. If there was no such thing as a third tier, I don't know, would I ever have had an opportunity maybe to show what I could do, and give somebody like Mick Wallace a bit of faith that I could maybe do it at League of Ireland First Division level. You look at some of the managers there that are managing in the third tier this year. I suppose the likes of a Gavin Pearce is a really good example. Somebody who has probably got managerial aspirations and would like to have a crack at a proper real go at building a managerial career for himself over the next 10, 15 years. And this is a brilliant grounding for him, a brilliant opportunity to go in there. And listen, plenty more like that. It's, from my own perspective, it's great to have a reasonably local club again in Carlow Kilkenny, CK United, who I think for the short season will be playing out of Carlow IT, but for next season will be playing out of Buckley Park, which is would have been my local League of Ireland ground growing up. So I'm really looking forward to seeing football there. And yeah, look, I think it's a really progressive step. I think arguably the most interesting part of it is the fact that it's going to mean relegation from the League of Ireland First Division, Kieran. I think that's an absolute game changer. As we know, League of Ireland First Division managers probably had an easy life to a certain extent over the last 10 years or so. If you weren't doing very well, you cut the budget halfway through the year, you cut your losses, and you just sat down or sat around the bottom of the table, and you held on to your few pound to have a proper go at the following season. That's not going to be an option anymore. So that's a serious game changer. So no, look, I think it's I think it's one of a number of progressive steps that the league has made over the last few years.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it and see how it goes. But let's start looking ahead to this week's matches, Shane. Another set of Premier Division matches coming your way this week. And we will start with Bohemians against Sligo Rovers at Dalymount Park.
Yeah, I'd like to meet the fella. I think even the most optimistic of Sligo Rovers fans now will do well to put forward an argument as to how they think they feel their side is going to take anything from this. No, look, Bows have been good, Kieran. They have been good. They had that one blip, one poor result the week before last, I think, wasn't it? Aside from that, they've looked very, very good in recent weeks. And, it's just a pity they probably are too far off to get themselves properly into the picture. But, serious daylight between third and fourth. They needn't worry about catching up behind them. And I suppose the key thing that we spoke about there with Rennie is the motivational side of the remainder of their league campaign. If they're in no fear of dropping to fourth, really, they're probably not going to be in the picture for catching first, which means realistically they're going to finish second or third. Keeping the motivational powers up and making sure that the players are up for every single game from now on is probably the only challenge that he has, particularly when you have the distraction of an FAI Cup quarter-final coming up, and they will hope more than just an FAI Cup quarter-final. It's very important that they don't take their eye off the ball in league terms. But I don't think Rennie will allow that. And look, I just think the gulf in quality between the two sides is just too much for us to contemplate anything other than a Bows win and possibly even, if you're looking at an ACCA or that, possibly even looking at a -1 there, I think they could win this one reasonably comfortably.
Yeah, they beat Sligo 3-1 in Sligo the last time they met, so they did cover a handicap there. Will I lock you in for a -1 on this one because they are a bit short at home? They're 3-10 just to win the game.
Yep, we'll go with a -1, Kieran.
Yeah, we'll lock you in on the -1 there. I'll get a price on that in a second. As I'm doing that, you can tell us about Galway United against Shelbourne. As I said, I was at Oriel on Friday, saw Galway win there. They didn't really create much. 2 chances, 2 goals. But I suppose well organised, robust as ever. And going up against a Shelbourne team who'll be rested. They didn't play last week as their game was postponed. So how do you see this one going at Eamon DC Park?
Yeah, look, I think that was an absolutely massive result for Galway. Massive result for them to go away from home and take those 3 points. It has, I won't say it's completely alleviated any relegation concerns, but it will have been an absolute kick in the stomach for the 3 beneath them, because I don't think any of those 3 would have been expecting to come off the pitch and find Galway with 3 extra points on the board. And listen, even your description of it, I mean, how often could you describe Galway victories like that? Very often, I would argue. John Caulfield's side just have an ability to take points from games where, they're very much in the balance or very much 50-50. They're very clinical. You look at the goals, they were extremely Galway-like goals, even so they were the other day. And I think now they'll be looking at this one, and I think they'll fancy themselves, to be honest with you. I mean, we've spoken about Shells and maybe the lack of a honeymoon period. I think they've lost 3 of their last 5 Shells, which isn't exactly fantastic form by any stretch of the imagination. And yeah, I would, I think there'll be a lot of people maybe that might stick this one down as a draw, but they've drawn. I think they've drawn in the 2 previous games so far this year. But I would give Galway a real chance in this one.
Yeah, you'd be worried. Obviously, Shelbourne have been very inconsistent this season. As you said, it's been a very up and down start for John Russell. The big high point, of course, was getting a draw against Ajax, but they haven't played since then. They did go out the cup against Kerry. So he's had a couple of disappointing results during his short time in charge of Shells. And with Dundalk starting to flounder, as we touched on earlier, I think Shell fans would be very, very disappointed if they don't at least finish 4th. So I think there's pressure on John Russell to go and get a win here in Galway.
Yeah, I'd agree very, very much so. And look, it's not, if there's pressure on you to go and try and get a result, I think you could pick easier fixtures than heading across to Galway. Like they're always they just never ever roll over, do they? You know, even if you get the win, you're going to know every bit about it. But yeah, I'm not so sure. I think the remainder of the season for Shells, I mean, we spoke about Bows and needing to make sure that they keep motivated for the rest of the season. You know, if you're in that Shells dressing room at the moment, I think it's a hard sell, Kieran. I think it's look, obviously footballers will be naturally motivated and should want to put their best foot forward for themselves every time. But I don't know, floating around mid-table, no FAI Cup, no Europe. I think the rest of the remainder of the season might be just a little bit of a trudge for them. You know, I think I suppose again you go back to it. The big motivating factor is can they go and nick fourth and hope that Pats or Bows win a title, win an FAI Cup, but they won't have been happy with the two of those sides drawing each other, as we spoke about in the FAI Cup. That's for sure. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to go with Galway in this one.
Okay, we're lucky and for Galway there. Galway haven't lost in Galway since June. I say in Galway because of course they played some of their games at Pearse Stadium, but they're back at Amadisi now. And Shelbourne, we all know it's been their home form that has actually been their biggest issue. But even if you look at their recent away form, I know there's some European games in there, but there has been a bit of a drop off on the road as well. So that's a big concern for John Russell. Pressure on him as they go to Galway. Shane Keegan's going for a win there for Galway at a price of 13-8. Bows -1, by the way, is 4-5 in that game we discussed earlier. We'll move on. St. Pat's against Waterford. I'm going to be commentating on this one for LOI TV on Friday. Looking forward to it. Pat's going up against an informed Waterford side.
Yeah, you've got a tasty game there, that's for sure.
Looking forward to it.
As we spoke about, the form that Waterford have shown under Coughlin has been absolutely top class. But look, we have got a bit of a resurgent Pat's record against Waterford this year is very, very good. Last time they played each other in the home game, Pats won at 4-1. Now look, again, that was under a different regime. It's a very, very different side that they're facing this time around. But I don't know, Kieran. I actually, would you believe, I bumped into Podge. I bumped into Podge last night in Carlow at the Hurling for Cancer fundraiser. So I did, and we were just chatting. I was just congratulating him on the current form and the whole lot. And you know, you look at the games they've got coming up. Okay, they've got a massive FAI Cup quarter final the weekend after next, and then they go and they're playing like a lot of the teams that are around them. And I think they've got quite a few home games against the teams that are around them coming after that FAI Cup game. And I don't know, I'm looking at it and going, maybe to a certain extent, I'm sure Coughlin will be making sure, as I spoke to him, he was talking about keeping the foot on the neck. He won't be looking at it like this, but I don't know. I just feel like this is a little bit of a free shot game for Waterford, and that maybe there might be one eye on that FAI Cup game and then those big games against the other relegation candidates that follow swiftly on the back of that. And yeah, I'm as I said, they certainly won't roll over. They certainly won't roll over, and they are a farm side. But I just think they might have bigger fish to fry coming down the track, and might allow Pats to get a little bit of run on them this weekend.
Pats are 1-3. Is that too short?
Yeah, it is. It is a short price, and listen, I think it's a very different game than the Bows Sligo one. Even though it's short, you know, I'm confident saying give us -1 in the Bows. I wouldn't be as confident give us -1 on Pat. So I think I would be throwing it into an ACCA at the 1-3 probably. But yeah, you could argue you might want a bit more value to justify it. Even though I think it's the most likely result, you might want a bit more value in the price to justify it.
I'm just trying to have a look around here to see. Waterford, as you said, they've been in great form. So with the likes of Podjam and Tommy Lonergan scoring a lot of goals, you'd maybe think both teams to score. But of course, they had the scoreless draw with Sligo last time. They had a scoreless draw with Galway recently enough as well. Pats aren't, despite their decent form, they're not scoring bag loads of goals either. So 10-13, both teams to score. You might be tempted that way, but there's probably reasons to go against it as well. Is this the sort of game you want to leave out, or are we going to go behind Pats here for the ACCA?
No, we'll have enough confidence in Pats. It'll boost our winnings a small bit given the other in it, I suppose.
Perfect. We'll put Pats in there at 1-3, and that brings us then to the Louth Derby. This should be tasty at Sullivan and Lamb Park on Friday between Drogheda and Dundalk.
Yeah, it really will, Kieran, no doubt about it. And like I say, it's strange to be saying it, but I think if you were allowed to, if you let Drogheda handpick a game for themselves this weekend, I think this they would have done well to handpick a better game.
With that in mind, Shane, how would you price this game?
Ooh, right. I'm going to say Drogheda are possibly still 11-10. No,
Much better value
what
than that. Two to
are
one
they?
outsiders, Dundalk 5-4. I'm very surprised to see that.
Are they? Yeah,
Yeah, 2-1 looks a
yeah.
big price.
It does. It does. It does. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think, look, I think there's definitely value to be got there because, look, at 11-10, I was going to say I was at 11-10, I was going to say I was going with them anyway. So I was. So at that price, I'd be all the more tempted. Yeah, I just, time and time again, we've seen it in the last few seasons, when it really gets sticky. Kev manages to come up with a big result, and I think they will be so zoned in on this one. And as we said, Dundalk have had their troubles since the transfer window and the few players that they've lost. So yeah, I think that's of all the games we've spoken about and all the prices we've looked at so far. I think that's the one I'd be having a serious look at the moment. Yeah.
That's your value bet this weekend. Drogheda 2-1 at home to Dundalk. And then on Sunday, Shamrock Rovers, hopefully they'll have qualified for the Conference League by the time they head up to the Ryan McBride Brandywell to take on Derry City, who come into this off the back of that Tonkin against Bohemians.
Yeah, and again, look, it's so hard, isn't it? Because you're trying to predict how this one's going to go, while at the same time Rovers already will have a game in between, and I think how that game in between goes will have a massive bearing on Sunday, just in terms of the general feeling amongst the playing group. If they were to go to Finland and get the result they want, I think that does then boost their chances of winning the league game as well, just because of the feel good factor that would be around the place. Whereas I do think there'd be a hangover on Sunday if they were to go out.
They could be going
Of
into this game only 1 point clear at the top.
They could, yeah. The pressure could be on, that's for sure. And look, I again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I just find it impossible to put forward any argument for Derry in recent weeks, one way or another. So I'm gonna go with the hopeful angle that this is going to be a Rovers team that are still in Europe by the time this game is coming around, and also from the hopeful angle, as you've said, that they're only 1 point ahead and that they're now heading into a game that they must win, and that they're in good spirits. And I think they will be able to head up the road and win that one. Yeah.
Yeah, again, looking at the pricing of this 8 to 5 year pick, I'm surprised at that, despite everything around Rovers going into this game. And imagine if they get a positive result on Thursday, that price might change. But I think everyone would find it very difficult to have confidence in Derry at the moment. So Shane's going with a Rovers win there, 8 to 5. Just to recap on his 5 selections, he's very confident about a Bows win against Sligo Rovers. He's gone Bows -1 there. He's gone with Galway to win at home to Shelbourne, St. Pat's to win at home to Waterford, Drogheda to win at home to Dundalk, and Shamrock Rovers to win away to Derry City. But very confident about the vast majority of the home teams there, Shane, this week. And that fivefold ACCA will come to just over 48 to 1 on the Bar One betting app right now. So check that out. Gambling for over 18s only. See gamblingcare.ie. Jim, before we go, let's get your ACCA for this week.
Yeah, we'll go with the obvious ones there, Kieran. So we will in Bows and Pats. I think that definitely makes the most sense. So it does. And then I suppose usual story. We'll drop it down to the first division for a look down at the first division. And look, we spoke about although I thought I had a nice handy one in the first division last week too, only for
Mm.
Cork City, the wheels coming off there. But no, looking at the first division again this week, I think Finn Harps, it's just such a struggle there for them at the moment. It really is. I mean, there's a prime example now of a club that are they need to hit the panic button this season because they don't have to worry about relegation. Imagine them being in this scenario this time next year. Now I certainly don't think that'll be the case, as I've spoken before about my admiration for Patrick McElhenney. I'm sure they'll make a better stab at things next year, but at the moment they are in bad order, that's for sure. And we'll go with UCD as our third team there.
Yeah, so that's Shane's ACCA there. Bows to beat Sligo, Pats to beat Waterford, UCD to beat Harps in the first division. That was 11 to 10. We'll boost that to 11 to 8 in all our Bar One betting shops this week. And your best bet this week, Shane, will be boosting this online and on the app later in the week. What are you going for?
Yeah, you have me sorely tempted now after giving me the Drogheda price, but I'll stick with my original. For those that are listening, have a look at Drogheda now, all right, at that kind of price, and lob in the likes of a Shane Farrell or a Mark Doyle or somebody like that for a goal. But no, we'll go with the one that I'd been looking at earlier in the day, which was I just have a sneaking suspicion for Galway in this game against Shelbourne. And one of the big Achilles heels, maybe not quite as prevalent in recent weeks, but still an underlying issue for Shells has been those defensive set pieces. It's been a problem all season long for them. And you look at a guy like Stephen Walsh, who just absolutely loves a header, doesn't he? He fancies himself in the air against most, and he'll be looking at this Shells team and looking at opportunities off all set pieces. We know they'll make the most of them, frees, corners, throws, and the whole lot. So I'm going to go with, he may not be the most prolific man in the league, but this game just looks like it's nicely set up for him. I'm going to go with Stephen Walsh to score in that game and Galway to win.
Okay, Galway to win, Stephen Walsh to score. That Shane Keegan's best bet for this week. That will be boosted on the app and online later on in the week, so keep an eye out for the boosted price there as we get closer to Friday. But that's it for this week's League of Ireland Lowdown. Again, a reminder to give the Bar One Betting Podcast a follow on Spotify for all the latest episodes. And until next week, thanks for tuning in.